Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, MtoA 521 episode 3, I will be talking about volume shading and hopefully getting a pretty fine look onto the gemstone. Maybe we will do another episode we will see at the end of this one. Before we jump in, some quick promotional stuff. So if you want to follow along, feel free to join me on Patreon to get access to all the scene files and all the reference photos, all the renders, some nuke scripts. So feel free to go on Patreon, and there is like a source files tier at the bottom. If you sign up for this, you get all the previous source files of more than 20 tutorials and for all the upcoming ones as well. So be sure to check that out. And as always, I am on Instagram, so you can follow me right here. And I also have the download links for the Light Shader plugin for the DCC's Nuke, Katana, and Maya, which is like a tool set with different helper tools to, for instance, create AUVs or light control, something like that. So be sure to check that out. And also, this is my first app in the App Store, iOS only currently, which allows you to see measured RGB values for lots of different kind of materials. And also with the update 2.0, you are able to place objects in augmented reality and see how those metals behave in your current environment. So that will sum it up for the promotion stuff. So let's jump right into our last episode, where we finished off creating some interesting scatter effects using will pass position and generating some thicker, kind of foggy, misty effects to the bottom of the crystal. In this video, as I said, we will be doing some volume shading and also trying to break up the roughness on it and try to get a final look. We have some references right here, and you can see that there is different kinds of effects. So I'm kind of trying to get something like where it's more solid at the bottom and then it fades, or like there's like a color gradient to the top. We can see what we can achieve as well. So I think the first thing to do is play around with the volume shading. So I'm saving the scene now. And if you checked out the previous tutorials, I have different kinds of geometries. So this one is a very high res one. So let me just stop the render and jump in here. So this is the sculpted one, which we did in episode 1. And then there is also the Crystal C, which is the low poly version of this, which looks like this. And we will be using this guy to generate a volume shader. So currently I have hidden the high res geometry, and I will be just going into a new tab right here, and I call this maybe Ep03, and I'll create an AI standard volume shader. So that's all there is to it, and I'm just assigning it to there. And for this to work properly, what you need to do is go into the shape of the geometry and go to Arnold tab. At the bottom is volume attributes, and add some step sizing, which is kind of a detail of the voxel grid. And then you have volume padding, which is interesting for displacement, which I will be showing in a bit. So let's just hit play here, and I think we need to update the full scene. Alright, so let's jump into displacement shading. I have assigned the volume shader to the gemstone, and the first thing what I want to do is I want to control the density using a projection map. And you can see the higher the density, the more solid the object gets. So let's just do that right away and create a ramp and use a projection. Let's just give it some room to breathe here and move these things over. And for the projection, let's just connect the out color, one single value, the float, to the density. And then you can already see that something is not correct. So in the projection, we obviously want to project from the render camera. So we jump to perspective and we make sure we link it to the main camera. And you can still see there's something going on. So let's just change the mode to match camera resolution, and then we should be good to go. And you can also choose isolate selected, and you can see that the ramp is from the bottom to the top fully projected onto the geometry. So now the next thing would be to adjust the ramp itself. And to do so, we just jump in here, and I want to create the effect of some little blotches, something in between, like just some, I don't know, some kind of cloudy texture within this. So what I can do is just, first of all, I want to invert the ramp. So I want to have more stuff at the bottom. And let's change the type to be exponential down. Yeah, which is a software fall off. And then for the bottom part, let's just go nuts on the color and go to a value of maybe 10. So it should be very solid and then slowly fading off towards the top. And I can adjust the ramp slider to control the height pretty easily. And this is projected ramp, right? So this is not UV based. And then you can see we get the nice fall off. And let's say we want to create some noise. And to do so, let's just introduce it in the ramp shader. And you can see now what we get. It's very interesting effect. And if we play around with the frequency, we can get some more detailed patches everywhere. So just by doing this, this doesn't really look very nice. So what I want to do now is play around with some displacement. So let's just save this guy and connect a noise texture into the displacement slot right there. So I'm creating an AI noise, and this will connect into the displacement. The whole color goes into displacement, and you can already see something is going on. It's kind of displacing it, and this is only working because in the crystal shape itself within the Arnold tab, I changed the step size to 0.1 and the volume padding to 1 just to get the displacement working. And if you want to first see the volume without the density adjustment, let's just break that connection, Alt Shift and drag in here to cut it, and then you get the displacement right there. And for the test, let's increase the density to maybe 5. And this is what we get out of the box just by connecting the noise. Okay, so now let's increase the octaves to add some more detail, maybe 3. And just play around with some distortion. And we might need to update the render. Sometimes that's helping. And you can see it's only going in 2 axes. There is no Y translation. So we need to change the mode from scalar to vector, and then we get actually some proper cloud effects going on. So this looks already very interesting. And we would just need to either add more detail, let's try 5 maybe, to get more detailed clouds, and we can play around with the distortion or get more swirls, something like that. So now we have a very detailed breakup right there. It might be actually too small, so let's maybe go 3 octaves again, and this should do the trick, I guess. So if we now hook up the density again, we should see something pretty interesting. These little clouds of something, which is very cool. And we can easily just play around with the ramp or the noise itself to get something more interesting looking. So let's just go into the ramp and see what we can do by adjusting the noise. Slower fall off, not as crazy. Let's just do something like that. Really subtle, and then the frequency can go maybe a bit lower, so we don't have these lots of smaller patches, just a few ones. And then you can also play around with the wave, so you get different, which one is it? This one? So you get different patterns. It's kind of just rotating the UVs, I think, the projected UVs. Yeah, this actually is also very interesting. This is just, I think, overall just too much. So maybe we should just stick with what we have right here and just adjust the ramp if we needed to go up higher. I think just this will actually do it already. So now the next thing would be to actually incorporate this with our gemstone. And you can see there's a slight offset, and I'm not sure exactly why that happens. But what we will need to do now is kind of adjust it blindly just because I don't really see or know where it is, and I couldn't find a way to actually translate it without breaking the structure. So let's head over to the viewport and just move this thing around. Alright, so now we're in the viewport, and this is currently the original position, and what we want to do now is kind of because we can't really change the scale of the displacement, what I need to do is actually scale it down here and maybe actually move it to the right and up. I know this is kind of a hack, but for this will need to do it. And let's just unhide the high-res geometry, which is now here. And let's just see what we did now. If I render and update full scene, these are now overlapping, right? So now you can actually see that we get this cloud structure right in here. And if I go to the original shader and just for now disable all the funky things we added to it, where is it? So if we let's just quickly assign a shader, which is just simple transparent standard surface. Where is it? There it is. And let's just select the surface and assign that. Okay. So this is now just the glass or just the gemstone, and we don't really see the cloud effect, which is exactly what we want. So which means the cloud is really inside of the gemstone. So let's bring in transmission and disable roughness and change the IOR to be diamond again. Right, so this is now what we get, and I think this is working pretty well. You can see the cloud structure right within the gemstone right there, and actually at the bottom you can see it as well. So this is kind of the way to incorporate volume shading with glass. You just create another geometry which goes in between, and now what you can do, you can just shade it as whatever you wish to do. You can project a texture on it, which we will do as well. So for the scatter, this is the color of the inside, and we will be just projecting some more stuff on it. So let me just hide the crystal from the outliner. Did this work? Oh, I hit the wrong thing. Okay, so that's that, and now we just need to kind of project a color here. So this would be the scatter color. We don't want to work with the emission because this won't have any shadowing. The only thing which gives us shadows is the scatter. So again, let's just kind of project something on it using a projection node again, and we will just create another one using a ramp again, a projection, sorry, it was a delay, and this one is switched to projection, a perspective, and we choose our main camera, change the gate to resolution, and this should do it. So this should connect to the scatter color like so. And now if we look at the ramp itself, we should see the fall off on here. There's some weirdness going on, so let's see if we can fix this. No, it's correct actually. Okay, so it's all good. So let's just look through or lock this node actually and go to the ramp and just play around with some colors. So let's choose kind of this dark blue, and for this color let's change or select I don't know, something more like that. And now we can do the same thing. We can just play around with noises. We can also, instead of doing this, we could also just connect a noise into each of these colors to get also a very interesting result. But let's see how that looks now. So this would be that, and obviously we can play around with the ramps, and you can see we get now these interesting effects here. And I think this works pretty well. So we can actually go up and go nuts on the noise, maybe 3, which should add a lot more higher frequency stuff to it. Maybe 2 is working better. So something like that. I know this is not something which we see right here, but it's an interesting effect. We can go more in the brighter colors for something more dramatic, I guess. We can also go into a completely different color hue. Maybe something like that. And now if we unhide the main crystal again. Let's see what we get. And this is still the wrong shader, but this is also looking pretty cool. So there's some mistiness to it. So let's just assign the main shader like so. And then this is what we get. So we have the scattering at the bottom, and we have now the volume shader in here. So the next step would be to create something which is adding maybe some iridescence, and then we need to break up the spec, because if we would look at the code for now, the code result, this is very clean and uniform. So the next step would be to break up that. Let's do that. So to speed up render times, I'm just hiding the volume crystal for now. We should just be working with the simple crystal geometry, crystal shader, right? Okay, so this is our code, and we need to break this guy up. Currently, we have a single roughness connected to this, which is a value of 0.4. So without any roughness, this is what it would look like. Pretty clean. And now we need to break it up, work with the edges, and I think we can use the bump curvature for this. Which one was that? Unlock. We would use this one, right? So I'm just creating an AI range, and this guy connects. Let's just select the out color, which connects to the new range, and this one goes to the code roughness, like so. And now we should already have something interesting. If I'll check the code, we should have now rougher edges and cleaner flat surfaces, but we can definitely adjust it. So now we have values of 0.2. We want to get some higher values in there for sure. Okay, so let's just bring down the input max so we can lift the edges. Values of 0.1, and maybe go even further. Let's see how this looks for the code. Okay, so this is interesting. Now we get definitely some more breakups on the edges. And what I also like to do is actually introduce some kind of flakes. And to do that, let's just create the AI Flake Shader. I guess this is not the best thing to do because it's dependent on the angle. But if I connect this, you can see what we get. Isolate selected. So this is the Flake Shader. And if I now change the scale to be a lot smaller, actually 0.05, we have this very small scale, and we can go up on the density. And we can just use, let's say, the blue channel, which looks like this, or the red. Or we can just use the luminance as well. I think if you hit L. So this is something to work with actually. So we will be just using a desaturation on this. So AI color correct and connecting these guys up. And this one will go into the roughness, but we will need a combine. I'll explain what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to multiply them together. So AI composite, and this one goes here, and that's connecting up there. And then we go back to the code roughness. There we go. And now in the color correct, we can just easily desaturate it. And we get the luminance, right? Something like that. And now what I want to do is I just want to contrast the map so we get really dark spots like this, which will just multiply the previous range so we get some breakup everywhere. So, and I show you how this looks like. If I go here and I go to multiply, you can see now we have these very interesting breakups on the edges. So it's very flaky now. And what we can now do, go to the previous range, and we can just increase the input min to have some value. And now we should see something very cool looking. So flakes everywhere, and this should actually break up the code quite a bit. Let's see. So yeah, so now you can actually see everywhere these little glints everywhere, which is very interesting. Let's have a look in the crystal spec color if we use that. No. So yeah, this is kind of adjusting that. It still has some code, which is very interesting. I'm not sure where it's getting that from. Let me just double check that. All right, so this was just a little issue with the shader. So if I reduce the weight, it's actually going completely off and there is no spec at all. So this is what I would expect. And this is currently what we get with the spec on top. And we have the roughness being controlled by our interesting flaky map, which looks like this. So this is changing the roughness. We have values of 0.8 and we have values of 0, 0.05. So this should look pretty interesting. So now we can also try to play around with iridescence, which we can see, if I can zoom, I can't really zoom with the tablet Wacom, but there's some iridescence going on. So in the shader, we actually have that option. And I just want to see how that would look like if we just enable the thin film stuff. So let's go maybe up to 800. And it's hard to see on just the code, which is unfortunate. If it's actually working at all. But if I bring in the specular base itself, we should see it happening. Yeah, there's definitely some color shifts going on. You can see it here on the edges. It's mainly actually on the, let's just check the specs, right? So this is the spec pass, and there you can actually see what's going on. It's very apparent on the specular lobe, but not so much on the code, which is interesting. But there's still something happening. So if we go back to the code layer and then play around, you can see it right there. If I change the thickness to something, it's definitely changing some color there. Some blue, it gets orange as well. So for now, let's just not focus on that, but continue more on the glass shader. So what the last step would be is actually to introduce some dispersion Abbey, and this is breaking up the wavelengths. So 62 is kind of something you would see on like hard crystals, depending which one you choose. Sapphire 72, which is pretty high. Which is just breaking up the wavelength, and you can actually see what's going on. It's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting effect. And then you can definitely go lower to get not as a strong effect, or a strong, I think actually the lower you go, the more it breaks it up. And you can see now, this is now kind of recreating this effect there. And you can really see the kind of the diamond look to it, and I think it looks pretty cool. So we should definitely keep this enabled. Maybe a value of 10, so it's not that crazy, or maybe even 20. Again, this is not physical correct because the diamond has a value of 55, I think, but it still looks very cool. So that's something we need to enable for sure. And what else? We can play around with the bump map some more, because currently we just have the bump breakup right here, but we still need to break up the bump for the specular pass to break up the roughness on the transmission, right? So if I would just connect this to the code, to the normal camera, we should see a totally different image. A completely broken up refraction, and you can see that's happening right there, which is interesting, and I think we should work with that to get the final render going. So I'll be just oh, this might actually work. I just need to reduce the intensity a bit. So let's just create another bump slot, AI bump 2D, and just connect this guy as well to the bump map, and this one instead goes to the normal camera. So now we have the option to control it independently, and if I go crazy on the value, you can see a really big breakup there. And obviously we forgot to plug in, I think I plugged in the wrong ones. So this is actually the map right there. So this should actually go into the map. Come on. Okay, so this is now what we get. So definitely a very crazy breakup on the roughness. So by playing around with the bump height, we can introduce some breakup in there. This is already too much, and it already looks too much as ice, so maybe 0.1, maybe 0.5, and I think that is something we can work with. Really subtle breakup. And the next thing would be to bring back the dispersion. Let's see a value. What did you say? 15, maybe 10? Oh, not 50. 158, 15. Let's see what we get here. Yeah, I think that's working pretty nicely. I think, oh, well, it might be a bit too strong still. So let's try a value of 0.02. Let's just stop the render and unhide our volume pass and just render this again. So update full scene. And now we should have the cloud as well in there. Let's just render this portion. So very interesting. So I will render this now and then I'll be back. So after 2 minutes, this is what we get with all the stuff included. So we have a volume shader, we have scattering at the bottom, we have some bump maps for the refraction, we have some dispersion going on. So just using these techniques, I'm pretty sure if you spend a lot more time on this, you can get very convincing gemstones and realistic shaders. And this kind of thing applies the same way for ice, like ice cubes or like ice crystals. So you can use the same technique to achieve those effects. And I just wanted to give you an introduction of all the fancy things which you can do with the shaders using world position to create or to get a Y ramp, or you can actually use also X ramps and all that stuff. You can create projection to control volume shaders, and you can get you can definitely create very interesting results just by using these techniques. And because it's just a tutorial, I'm not telling you what you have to do step by step to create that exact result. It's more like giving you an idea of what you can do with these techniques, so that this is what most of my tutorials are about. It's mostly presenting a technique, and it's up to you to in the end create something really stunning, really great looking. So please feel free to share your renders with me and like tag me on Twitter or on Instagram and whatever, and I have a look and I share them as well. So I hope you enjoyed this crystal series, and yeah, let me know how you like it. Give me a thumbs up, and thank you for watching this, and I see you in the next series. Goodbye.